Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Yeah, a few days ago I did a video about organic farming. It was from the channel Farming Explained, and I found another one that I thought maybe was interesting. And let's see, was it this one? I don't believe this. Basically it was about, sorry about that, but I did not, I think I clicked on the wrong one. No, it's gone. It was the difference between milk and Oatly. Yeah, Oatly versus Big Dairy. I think it's very clear that
Today we are
still quite. I'm 100% dairy person. I'm Dutch. I love my milk. I love my cheese. I love adding thing, yogurt, everything that's made of it. I know a lot of people go towards oatmeal. Yeah, it is still a farming product, I guess, but I don't think it has the same. I don't think it tastes good at all. I guess you can use it in some food, in some recipes. I don't know, but let's see what he has to tell us about that. I don't think you have the same benefits from it. Let's say it that way. Who's driving? I don't know if you heard that, but there's some kind of tractor filling the water in for the hotel. Just driving water like 2-3 days a week. That's a nice deal. I could do that.
discussing the anti-capitalist sentiment that is often present in attacks on the farming community. We hear a lot about big dairy and other stuff like big wool, most commonly lumped together in the more generic phrase big pharma. Next week we'll discuss how free market capitalism interacts with the land, and we'll see what important man C.S. Orwin thinks on the subject. And I'll argue that farmers are not generally motivated by a capitalistic ideology. But this week we shall focus on anti-capitalist criticisms of farming because I think they often contain strange paradoxes. I'm of the view that capitalism, the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit, works very well for some things and not very well for other things. Market failure does exist. I hope that's an uncontroversial assessment. And I would also like to make clear that I think an anti-capitalist critique of the food system as a whole would be very difficult to disagree with. There are lots of problems caused by the profit incentive. The food system has a fairly unusual market structure. You have the consumer who consumes, you have lots of little small-scale producers, farmers who produce whole products like milk or wheat or a pig. And these goods are homogeneous, which means they're not differentiated from the same products made by other producers. But this makes the middleman very important. They take these raw products, process them into manufactured goods, and retail them in supermarkets. The
problem is there are a few middlemen. So they don't just produce it and try to sell it. They produce it, they sell it, and then the ones that bought it, they try to sell it. You know, there's too many steps in between. And that makes the food expensive, and the farmer feels like they don't get enough for their food.
There are often very big companies who operate for profit and compete with each other for profit. Because the raw materials are homogeneous, the middleman controls the price. If a dairy farmer demands a higher price, the supermarket can just go to one of the many other dairy farmers that exist.
Yes.
So farmers are price takers. They must accept the price offered to them if they want to sell their goods. But
or they need to go directly to the consumer. And I know it's a little bit more difficult, and the laws don't really help with that. And that's another story. But I don't think the government wants the farmers to sell directly to the consumer.
At the same time, consumers must pay whatever price these goods retail for, so the middleman has a lot of power. They set the price at both ends. Food today, in historical terms, is relatively cheap and plentiful because this system is so efficient. But there are also lots of problems. Processors and retailers are typically massive companies. In Britain, we have a handful of supermarket chains, and companies like Nestle and Unilever have enormous power, and they use that to keep as much of the price of a product for themselves as possible. They have a profit incentive. And the result is they take the whole products that leave farms to manufacture and retail stuff that they know is unhealthy and artificial and addictive. Consumers pay high prices to give them a profit and have diets worse than they otherwise might, while producers get squished, often paid below the price of production for their goods. I will flesh this out more in the future, but I just wanted to establish...
Yeah, and the government doesn't really help with that because they often give subsidized stuff, so they don't help it actually. They just make sure that the big companies keep going, doing what they do, basically. Maybe they get the money back that way, I guess, in taxes, but still, it's like a big loop, goes round and round. Nobody
While
stops.
there are lots of benefits to the current food system, I think these could be retained while fixing the very many problems associated with the oligopoly of massive companies that dominate it. So in this way, an anti-capitalist critique of said companies would be valid. However, most anti-capitalist critiques of the food system, you see, are not aimed at these massive companies, but rather farmers, the producers, and their representative bodies. I will argue next week that farmers do not perceive themselves as capitalists and do not have the profit incentive as their primary motivation. For example, this Farmer's Weekly shows a farmer getting his pockets emptied by a capitalist, drawing a distinction between the two. But nevertheless, a lot of criticism farmers get in the media comes from an anti-capitalist perspective, often from people who align themselves with the left wing. We see this in the title of this book. This is vegan propaganda and other lies the meat industry tells you. Industry is capitalist. They advertise to sell you more stuff driven by the profit incentive. They lie, it's propaganda. This book is in opposition to that, so the suggestion is that it's anti-capitalist and honest. And I see this all the time in my comments. As soon as I say something that people don't like, I've been brought out by the agrochemical industry because, of course, only money could motivate me to say the things that I do on this channel. Sometimes this is divorced from reality to the point that it's funny. As somebody from a dairy farming background on both sides of my family, I don't think big dairy exists. It's something of a conspiracy theory. But I showed my dad this article that rails against big wool, which wants you to believe it's nice to animals and the environment. It's not. That got a belly laugh from my dad. Wool from commercial
I never heard of that, big wool.
sheep is famously not worth anything, and it generally costs more to shear a sheep than the wool itself is worth. This guy said in 2020, our sheep cost £1 to shear and we get about 15 to 30p a fleece. So he composts the wool and uses it as fertilizer. He doesn't even sell it. So
Yeah, that sounds about right. I know in Norway you don't really get much for it, but that's more the quality of the wool from the sheep, I guess. But they still shear them and deliver it. I don't know. I don't know why actually. I think all the money goes straight to the shearers. They come from England, by the way, most of them.
if you had a portal that you could pull woolly sheep out of, shear them and throw them into another portal, you would lose money every time you did that. And that's not including all of the other attendant costs in farming. Buildings, machinery, ground rent, vets bills, fuel, insurance, labour, anything else. The act of shearing alone loses money. Articles like this generally muddle the interests of farmers with the big processing companies, which in reality are opposed, because if farmers are making more money on a product, processors are making less, and vice versa. But they get lumped together and branded as animal agribusiness, big wool, big dairy, especially good at selling a folksy image that masks the industry's violence and environmental destruction. I find this amazing, the folksy image, the rural way of life, the idea that we have a beautiful pastoral England, my own culture is being attacked here as a front for destructive forces of capitalism. They're saying rural life, my existence is not beautiful. There is no such thing as a good shepherd. Shepherds are capitalists who have manufactured an image to sell products, and they are destroying the planet. So in this way, anti-capitalist sentiment against some ill-defined big wool leads people to directly attack rural culture in articles like this. I have experienced this many times myself. Someone at the Oxford University Labour Club made a speech saying they'd thought about it very hard, and animal agriculture was inherently colonialist because of the idea that you might own a living thing, which of course I had to stand up and object to, saying that I didn't think my family were colonialists, and of course agriculture must predate society and society must predate colonial society, so farming cannot be a colonial idea. But it remains, people are prepared to attack small family farmers who maintain a traditional relationship with the land that has existed for many centuries in Britain.
Yeah, that's one of the many reasons why I stop telling people I'm a farmhand. I don't want the discussions about it. That's basically it. I just try to avoid that. But I guess now I'm on YouTube, I look it up. Yeah, that's a bit against my own intuition. But anyway, here I am.
An ugly excess of capitalism. But at the same time, people are very familiar with capitalism and a lot of people benefit from it. Certainly the middle classes do. How you consume is part of your identity. I'm using an extreme but relevant example here because people who attack farmers for being capitalists often really like massive corporations like Oatly and
they don't only attack farmers because they think they're capitalists. They attack them because the environment, they attack them because animal cruelty, they attack them because, just think of anything. They will attack you for that. Try to get a discussion. Just let me be.
and corn. Why is that? I think it's because they don't want to change their own lives. They don't want an end to consumerism particularly, but would like capitalism to stop destroying the planet. So capitalism must be attacked where it interacts with nature. To them, a farming business commodifies nature. It puts a price on everything and does away with what it can't make profitable. Whereas companies like Oatly and Quorn, and indeed most companies, are slightly further up the food chain. They operate factories and distribution centres and advertising campaigns. They just buy in their raw materials. Their hands are clean. And that form of capitalism is often promoted by the same people who attack rural culture as a front for capitalist forces. This is seen in government policy. The Conservative government decided farming businesses should give way to nature, and they changed the funding formulas so landowners get paid for environmental stuff rather than food production. Traditional rural businesses, farms, were discouraged. The government has offered farmers a lump sum to give up. I mean, can you imagine them paying the airlines to cease operations? It's really strange. But as well,
It's really strange, but it happens everywhere.
as well as only paying farmers for environmental goods, they're also paying farmers less money. So we're having to diversify our businesses away from farming, which is seen as a good thing. The countryside is in transition, and we have done this. We used to milk cows, but we don't produce cheap, nutritious food anymore. I'm actually a builder most of the time, believe it or not. But in diversification, farmers...
I know a lot of people, a lot of family farms. Half of the family is doing something else, if not more. The same if it's like a smaller farm and it's just a one-man farm. Most of the time they have a job next to it and do the farming in the evening and the morning.
Being encouraged to wind down the parts of their businesses that interact with nature and instead use their assets, their capital, to generate income in line with the profit incentive. This anti-capitalist narrative that attacks farmers who lose money every time they shear a sheep is just encouraging them to become capitalists who profit from their capital, just in such a way that the land is not involved. They're putting up solar panels, creating sports facilities, tourism enterprises, they're going into retail, or just becoming landlords. All this stuff is relatively small scale on individual farms, but it's capitalism. It's using capital to generate money. As far as I can see, these anti-capitalist attacks on farming are actually pro-capitalist in a material sense. What they actually want is the rural economy to be shut down and everyone to exist within an urban world. And as far as I can see, that's intended to be driven by consumerism and the profit incentive. This is present in the Wool article. They slam rural culture as being a front for capitalism, but do they suggest an alternate economic system? No, they just want you to change your consumption choices. They say you should bin off wool for preferable synthetic alternatives. The choice between a wool coat and a long-lasting synthetic one is very clear. That's not anti-capitalist.
Hey, synthetic. Yeah, okay. It's not very environmental friendly though. Wool is way better. You can use it in winter and summer.
It's just promoting what they see as an informed, ethical consumption choice. The bottom line is that this anti-capitalist article is encouraging you to consume stuff that comes out of factories. The Green Party's manifesto in the recent election has an interesting take, where it has slightly anti-farming and anti-capitalist undertones, but then wants to treble support for farmers. Why? I think this is because they're not actually in opposition to the standard urban conception of capitalism. They're very used to that. They engage with it in their daily lives and they understand it. They don't see it as threatening. So they encourage farmers to stop the capitalist exploitation of nature with the capitalist incentive, money. They're not trying to stop people being capitalists. They're quite happy to lean into money as an incentive, but businesses should not interact with nature. I'm aware that I'm overreaching a little bit here because we haven't yet discussed emissions, and emissions are normally the reason cited for this selective anti-capitalism. There is an improved method of calculating the warming effect of methane called GWP star, which undermines this completely. We will cover it in the future, but it already exists and people already know about it and choose to ignore it. But even if we accept the slightly reductive popular conception of methane emissions, why are anti-capitalist people so prepared to defend certain corporations? You could oppose farming and also oppose urban capitalism, but very few people ever seem to do that. When I was at university, I knew a PPE student who claimed to be a communist in principle, and he thought that farming was quite a bad thing and should probably stop. But when I suggested to him that perhaps Oatly, the multinational corporation, was driven by a profit incentive, he wouldn't have it. I had to listen to a communist tell me that my traditional family farm that doesn't even run a profit most years is bad, but Oatly, the multinational corporation, are the good guys. I find this very strange because Oatly behaves like a multinational corporation and they're really good at it. They have skillfully manufactured a loyal consumer base through innovative and very aggressive advertising. They have a really strong brand, they use friendly fonts on their packaging. Oatly has achieved.
Whoops. What are we getting? Some commercial or something, of course. Not now, guys. Just internet in a hotel, really. Let's see. Yeah. Why don't we have internet?
What every company dreams of, in that they have created an identity. For a lot of people, having
Oh. Come on now. What's going on? Why are you? Okay, go even lower then. Quality. But what it said here. Oh, now I'm breaking up everything, of course. It's not difficult, you know. You send something to the router sends something back. That's too many people here. Too many people here.
Good at it. They have skillfully manufactured.
I like this one. up to oat drink and save 72 in CO2, 70% in CO2. I don't believe that at all, because oat milk is made from wheat. What do you think all those machinery uses to harvest it and transport and the fabric and stuff like that? No way it's that much. But anyway, you don't get the same vitamins, you don't get the same taste. There's so much more that you can make from milk than from Oatly. So I don't get it. If you can drink Oatly just like that, like you can drink milk, I don't think you have taste. I think you need to let you check yourself with a doctor or something. I don't know.
Manufactured a loyal consumer base through innovative and very aggressive advertising. They have a really strong brand, they use friendly fonts on their packaging. Oatly has achieved what every company dreams of, in that they have created an identity. For a lot of people, having oat milk is not just a consumption choice, it is part of how they view themselves as citizens in this capitalist hellscape we must all suffer through. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. They think they do a good thing, but I don't think they make the world better at all. They just make one person very rich and they just lie to you. I don't know, Oatly can be used for stuff in food, in recipes and stuff like that for certain reasons, but that's not the reason why people use it.
Oatly are that concerned about the environment. Their product is mostly water. They could just ship it in a powder form that you mix yourself. But by shipping it as a liquid in cartons, they're just adding food miles to water, which is obviously not great for the planet. It's not environmentalism. They are capitalists selling a product.
And we have too little water anyway, so it's a little bit.
Quorn are very similar. They're motivated by the profit incentive and not the cause. They used to use battery eggs in their products and have some very underhand advertising practices. Take a look at this campaign. It's a movement to encourage educational institutions to stop serving beef and lamb. It's supported by academics and Sir Paul McCartney. These guys seem great, don't they? They're not capitalists, they believe in this stuff. But then if you scroll to the bottom of the page, you find this. It's been funded by Quorn, an alternative meat company. Very liberally, they've not demanded the movement change its messaging. I think this is a bit dodgy. I've known people crusade against meat having come across this website. Perhaps I'm being cynical, but I think they've been tricked into doing advertising for Quorn Foods. Here's an Oatly advert I thought was very clever. Please excuse the fact I've been on Reddit. So here they're establishing themselves in opposition to big dairy. They're anti-capitalist, fighting the faceless and interestingly unnamed big greedy corporations. And they're honest, we put our numbers on our packaging. They're offering a public platform for a dairy executive and are asking one of them to join them, suggesting that big dairy would be dishonest or hiding their damaging practices if they don't take up the offer. But this is a trick. It isn't a request for a big dairy boss, it's an advert. If you want.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. The internet is just very, very bad here sometimes. Especially when and there are a lot of people coming to the swimming pool here, local people. Unfortunately, they have mobiles and then connect to the Wi-Fi. What I don't really like. Because I'm a guest here. I pay for it way more than what they do. But I guess I just need to share. And I hope you don't hear the music in the background. I don't really see it on the gate, so I guess it's okay. Let's keep going, but basically what he's telling us, people are getting tricked in believing that Oatly is a perfect company and better than any other corporation.
from what might be called big dairy, there's probably 5 such people in the country, paying for an advert on Reddit wouldn't be how you get their attention, you'd email them. This is disingenuous. They're establishing themselves as anti-capitalist, honest, and good for the climate without actually saying anything of substance whatsoever. There's no facts here, it's very clever. Oatly are famous for their aggressive advertising campaigns and frequently get caught out by the regulator. And there's some really strange stuff on their YouTube. I shan't play it in case of getting a copyright strike, but they have a subliminal I suggest you watch, linked below. It's really odd. I presume it's a satire on some level, but it's a video of rolling countryside interspersed with flashes of pro-Oatly subliminal messaging. But people don't seem to mind.
Let's have a look. I'm not really afraid to get copyrighted. Maybe for the sound, I don't know. We'll see if we can find that Oatly. Oatly milk, let's see. We can find that. Flavor milk, is that? I don't know which one here we found. The new flavor. Does it matter which one I take? I guess need one of those sponsored ones, don't I? Is it this one? Don't think so. No. I don't know. Maybe I'm just I tried try this one. No, that's a clicky click. It's not coming out. Okay. I don't know which one he who cares? If I find it, I put it on the end.
Find this. Watch it and see what you think. I wasn't really sure what to make of it when I first saw it, but whatever the immediate point of this video is, it's clearly an advert trying to sell a product, which is something we're very used to. It doesn't seem threatening. We see it all the time. Ford tries to sell us cars. Apple tries to sell us phones. We can accept aggressive advertising because we understand what it is. Companies manufacture goods. They stick their logo on it and try to sell it to consumers. That's what Oatly does. But because farmers produce homogeneous goods, they can't advertise in the same way. When we used to produce milk, we sold it to a processor. If we wanted to increase the consumption of milk, we would have to shoulder the entire cost of the advert ourselves, while all processors and all dairy farmers would benefit equally, and the effect we would receive would be negligible. For an individual farmer, advertising would never be worth the cost.
Nope.
Sometimes you see branded processors advertising their own milk, like Cravendale, but adverts for farmers are generally done through industry bodies that are funded by members' levies, like the National Farmers Union or the AHDB. But these guys aren't capitalists. The AHDB doesn't have a profit incentive or products to sell. They just have a budget. But these adverts aren't to sell a particular product. They're not saying, go into a shop and find the product with our logo on it and buy it. Rather, they're selling an idea that a commodity is good. They're saying, buy milk. Any milk. Milk is good for you, you should buy some milk. But this rubs people up the wrong way because it's not an advert selling a product in the way that we normally understand. It's selling an idea. And that's not advertising, that's propaganda by Big Dairy. A while back, Person Everybody Likes Aubrey Plaza featured in a satirical advert for wood milk, an alternative milk made out of wood, the joke being that it has no nutritional value. When I first saw this, I sent it to a friend and they came back and said, surely that's just deforestation.
Wood milk. Doesn't really sound, it doesn't sound really environmental friendly.
But this created a firestorm because it's not advertising, it's pro-milk propaganda, paid for by the quasi-governmental dairy industry organisation administered by the United States Department of Agriculture that ran the Got Milk campaigns of the 1990s and 2000s. If you feel like being miserable, I invite you to go into the wood milk rabbit hole on YouTube. There's lots of vegans attacking Aubrey Plaza for being a dirty capitalist sellout, and there's loads of right-wing men, mostly, attacking the vegans for being upset. It's really depressing cultural nonsense. We haven't yet discussed the nutritional differences between milk and its alternatives, but Oatly and other multinational corporations have different motivations to governments. Oatly want your money, whereas governments benefit if their citizens have good diets because they'll have less days off sick and require less healthcare, and they'll work for longer, which means they pay more tax. The post-war government in Britain promoted milk for this purpose, which is now sometimes characterised as misleading pro-farmer propaganda. But helpfully, the people who decided to promote milk wrote books about it, explaining their thoughts. Christopher Addison, a doctor and the leader of the House of Lords for the duration of the socialist post-war Labour government, pushed for increased milk production in his book, A Policy for British...
Nowadays, everything the government pushes through commercials is propaganda by people, so it doesn't really matter what they say or don't say. It's what they do, doesn't matter. It's all propaganda anyway.
Agriculture, the root of so-called big dairy. Being a doctor, Addison's thinking starts with the health of the population, and he takes scientific advice, which tells him there is a great deficiency in the food of the people, especially amongst children, of what are described as protective foods: milk, butter, cheese, eggs, meat, vegetables, fruit, and to some extent of potatoes. British diets are inadequate. We need a supply of milk, cheese, butter, vegetables, eggs, fruit, and to some extent of meat that is far in excess of our present production. We must escape the folly of tolerating a distribution system which so inflates prices that it compels people to fill up their children with bread and margarine instead of giving them a fair supply of the other foods they need. And because of this, he wants a 100% increase in the domestic production of milk. This is not big dairy trying to sell more
Sounds about right, what he wrote.
Stuff. This is a medical doctor in the government trying to fix the widespread problem of malnourishment in the...
And there's the problem for many people, a doctor in the government.
British population. Bolstering dairy production was to improve the health of the public. It's the same reason governments discourage smoking. Addison was not motivated by the profit incentive. We will discuss this in much more detail when our little history of agriculture gets through the Second World War. But what's interesting is that now the idea milk is healthy is increasingly rejected as capitalist big dairy propaganda, but you never see people attacking Ribena in the same way. Ribena was promoted and distributed for free by the government during the Second World War at the same time milk was being promoted because we couldn't import other sources of vitamin C due to the pesky Germans. And to this day, blackcurrant is a very popular flavour in Britain, which I understand is fairly unique. And indeed, as somebody who was born a very long time after the Second World War, Ribena is my meal deal drink of choice. Do people ever attack the enduring popularity of blackcurrant flavours in Britain as a great success of dishonest government-backed big blackcurrant? They don't, because that would be ridiculous. The government's attitude to Ribena and milk were the same. They were both promoted for the health of the population. If anything, I think Ribena is more deserved of this type of criticism because today it has morphed into a sugary drink, whereas milk is still milk. I wanted to talk about...
A lot of milk that you buy in the supermarket is... water with white colored water. I would explain that. Especially the very light milk. Please buy milk from the farm and you will taste the difference. That it just there's not even a comparison. Even if you buy the high fat milk in the supermarket and you buy the milk from the farmer, it's crazy how big of a difference that is.
All this because I think it's based on a misunderstanding of how the countryside actually works. When we milked cows, we weren't motivated by profit. We needed money to survive, sure, but we'd sign a contract with a processor or a supermarket and then they'd lower the price below the cost of production and we'd stay in business by not taking wages ourselves. We'd live poor. If you're running at a loss, you have to keep going. You still have to feed the animals and give them medicine. That's a moral imperative. The finance doesn't come into it. Farms don't run on money, they run on optimism. You try and avoid ending the year in the red, but sometimes you can't avoid that. So you start the next year not with a profit, but with optimism. You hope that this year will be better. But optimism only works as long as the bank is prepared to extend your overdraft. But this anti-capitalist pressure seen in government policy is pushing businesses away from optimism. The optimism doesn't last forever, and when it runs out, as it happened with us, you have to generate income some other way, from your assets. When we milked cows, we used to average about £400 a year profit. But now we have done what the government and the Green Party and all of these anti-capitalist writers would see as preferable. We have given up. We no longer produce cheap, nutritious, high-quality food. Now we generate income in other ways, which they might see as preferable, but I don't see that it is.
However, the villagers once more devoted themselves wholeheartedly to agriculture, which had all the while continued to thrive alongside their other industries. Thus, they returned to a livelihood best suited to their environment. Early in the morning, the villagers go off to work on the farms. And the milkman starts his rounds.
Yeah, you can say a little bit more, even if it's old. All right.
Today,
Sorry about that. It is this encouragement, yeah. It feels very, very heavy sometimes. Even as a farmhand, I don't really see the financial of the farm. Of course, I notice it when it is a difficult period, but still, the questions you get outside of work from people, they try to have discussions all the time. So I just don't say I am a farmhand. And most of the time, what do you do? A little bit of everything. That's my answer most of the time. I'm just getting tired to explain myself and to make them think differently. Every time again. Because you're the bad guy. And if I'm already getting tired of that, what do you think farmers say? Who are losing money every year or just make it even if they're lucky. So yeah, I do understand that, and it is maybe a lifestyle choice for a farmer. But that's one of the reasons I tried to quit working as a farmhand and started to do a little bit more truck driving and stuff like that. But because I have the most experience in farming, I get more pay more as a farmhand than I do as a truck driver, and that's difficult to go back a few bucks per hour. That's it's not even a few. It's almost half. So yeah, you know, it's difficult to quit where you're heading. Anyway, I think it's very important to let people know what the farmers really do and why they do it. And that's why I have this channel now. And if I can work a little bit less on the farm, I got a little bit more energy to go into the discussions as well. So that will help a lot. I just, after 12 to 15 hour workday, I just don't feel like talking about why farmers do whatever they do, you know? I finally have the day off, so have off. But thank you for watching, you guys. If you guys feel the same way or do not agree at all, just let me know in the comment section and I make a video about whatever comments you have and prove you're wrong or right. Right. Thank you for watching and see you later. And